So, welcome back. Here we are with part two of Unscripted with Michael McGlynn. This is the second half of our attempted live stream conversation last week that went up in flames because of my ineptitude with technology and a faulty Wi-Fi connection that day. Hashtag Google Fiber. If you watch this, if this comes up as a keyword, get your act together, Google Fiber. You're supposed to be like the best internet. But okay, that's a different podcast topic. Enjoy. I'm just going to send you right into part two of my talk with Michael McGlynn.
Is performing on a regular basis right now, since you're not doing it, obviously, is this something you miss?
No. It's funny, I have been criticized over the years for being egotistical and being a bit of a bastard. And I've been criticized for, you really, when you're on stage, really suck it in and you love that. I don't enjoy performance. What I do enjoy doing is I enjoy making the artistic creation on stage, and that's all I enjoy. And I'm really only at my best when I'm surrounded by artists. I'm not really interested in controlling things. So when I work with the choir, I'll spend most of the time just getting them to take the first breath. And that could probably take, in a workshop, usually it takes about 3 hours to get people to take the first breath. Because they're going, oh, and you're thinking, that's not where you breathe. You don't breathe with your jaw. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is a great time for me because I don't have to write new music, which I'm not very good at doing anyway. I'm not very disciplined. I don't have to sing. I don't have to tour. And I know the choir are very upset about it because I know they love touring, but that's because they enjoy performing. For me, it's more the act of being with creative artists that's special. And I don't need to do that with singers. I can do that with other creative artists. Mm-hmm. And I am doing that at the moment. I'm using the time to look at new ideas, and I'm running that live stream. It's kind of funny. I'm beginning to have people on that are really, really special. Last night I had Cortez from Chanticleer on. I just love Chanticleer so much. And the second half, I had the lady who conducted, the first woman to conduct the Oscars, which was Emer Noon. And next week, I have Isaac Cates, who is KC, I think.
Yeah, he's from here in Kansas City, yeah.
He is one awesome guy, and the Ordained are just one amazing ensemble. It's hitting the feels, that's what you'd say. And my second guest is the Swedish, she's Finnish. She's a Swedish-speaking Finn called Linda Lampenius, who is a model and a superstar. She's a superstar in Scandinavia. She's also a virtuoso violinist. And these people, I'm having this wonderful experience of being able to reconnect with people. I'm connecting with a bunch of like-minded jazz heads in Japan, and we're doing a project together called Mouse on the Keys. And for me, I'm into breaking boundaries, and I'm looking at some dance music, and I'm making a film. I'm actually making 3 films at the moment. I've just made one, which is off next week. And then I'm making a documentary about myself, my favorite person. And I'll be completing that quite soon. So you'll be able to see more of me.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, everyone should definitely check that out.
I'm most excited about that one.
That does sound very neat, very cool. I like the idea. I definitely identify with what you said about not really missing the performance aspect. Because I've been reflecting a lot on what it is that I do and why I love it, because we've had nothing but time to reflect. And I think what I miss is not being able to have the everyday relationships with other people.
That's it.
And the interchanges and the collaborations. I love choral music, but I don't find myself hankering or yearning for any particular music to do. I think what I miss is the act of collaborating with people, watching with my young singers, watching them experience something musical for the first time. That's
But
one of my.
that's the correct relationship. It's that concept of experiencing it together.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something that I have to say that I do see so much in America. I mean, I do see quite a lot of control, and I do see it in Europe as well. This concept of controlling a choir and choirs being unable to function without being told what to do, and that's unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not healthy.
Yeah.
And I think that people need. I think I've been asked a lot about what I feel about choral music in the last few months and what's happened and where it's going and what can we do to save it. And I've watched quite a lot of the broadcasts online about it, and have to say a lot of people are talking about what's gone. For me, I think it's brilliant. We've been given an opportunity to start again and reboot, and people hankering after what they had need to grow up and move on. It will not be the same. People have changed, as you say yourself, Chris. You've had time to reflect on what you do and the reasons why you do it. Most of us have been rushing towards a point that we didn't know where it was. We didn't know where we were going. And now we've been stopped. And we need to ask questions of ourselves. We need to look as well, at the way choirs are made up. I don't mind saying it, but there are ideas out there which are completely unique. I was talking with Paul Phoenix yesterday he's in Hong Kong. He's ex-King Singers. And he was telling me about a Finnish group called Nomad and how they were formed. And I don't want to go into details with it because in some ways it's so startling that I actually I'm still trying to digest what he told me. But what the essence of what it was breaking apart choirs and making individuals be completely proactive on their own, so that choirs aren't about 20 people being together anymore. Choirs become about 6 people being together, or 4 people being together.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at the music of the 16th century, I don't know if you've ever sung the Agnus Dei with your voice. You probably have sung the Agnus Dei by Byrd, have you? From the 4-part Mass. Yeah, well, that was written for 4 voices. Mass for 4 voices. That's what it was. It wasn't written for 4 voices in a choir. And as a result, when you hear it sung in a choir, it sounds crap. You're really working hard to make a big choir sound like 4 solo voices. Yep. Composers need to write for smaller ensembles. They need to stop looking at the checky that's coming in at the end of each month from the publisher, and they need to start looking at what people need. If 4 people can get together in a room and sing, we need more repertoire written for 4 voices. We need more repertoire written for 7 voices. We need, as directors, as artistic directors in my case, and as conductors, to facilitate our singers so that they can do that without us. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, I think, and I'm now stepping on eggshells, we need to bloody well go out and learn how to sing. Yeah. If you can't sing and you're conducting, use this time to go and learn to sing. Learn what it is. Any conductor that cannot sing should not be conducting. Otherwise, you are directing traffic. A semaphore. It doesn't mean anything. This relationship then, when things do come together, you bring back people who have become proactive and you have a richer experience together. So the fact that I'm amazed how many choirs have stopped, I don't think Zoom is a good idea. I don't think choirs on Zoom is a good idea. It's a good idea if everyone is drinking wine while they're singing. But I can't see what the point of it is otherwise. It replaces what we've lost. But we haven't lost anything. This is a stage moving forward. Life does not go backwards. And those of us that embrace this change, well, hopefully we'll be listened to when it's over. But I don't know. I find that choral music is it's one of the most conservative communities of artists I've come across. So I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that it's also the community at large with the least sense of its own value within the musical firmament.
Yeah, and I think I've got a reason for that. A lot of our jobs are justified in America based on how many children, for those of us who teach school, how many kids can we fit in the room? because in the past, and I think that might start to have to change, but one of the value of a choir teacher for a large public or state funded school in the United States is that I can teach 2 or 3 times the number of students in a period than an English teacher can. And so I save the school money by doing. And so one of the things I've thought about during this pandemic, and also as I reflect on what my school program will look like going forward, it's very likely that our local government tells us that we've got to have a minimum class size, or sorry, a maximum class size, where the tradition, the 100 plus year tradition in my school choral program of having this large 80 to 100 voice concert chorale might have to go by the wayside. And on one hand, I'm very sad about that, because they might tell me, you've got to take that group of 85 next year and break them into smaller groups, and all of that. But then at the same time, I think, wow, what an opportunity it could be to, because one of the things that I've always lamented about my program is that when the kids get into those large groups, they tend to develop leaders who get all of the acclamation, because they're the
get
ones
all the attention.
Get all the attention, and then there will be another 50% of the group that oftentimes feels very unimportant.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something you have to think about very much. But I'm going to even present a larger concept to you, and that's that when you are dealing with the hierarchy of classical music, you have their conductors and soloists, and then you have opera, and then you have symphony orchestras and composers and classical composers and the avant-garde, and then you come down and down and down and down and down and string quartets, and then there's where we are. And in fact, the correct portrayal of that graph is the other way around. Everything else is copying the human voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Art is an expression of community. And that's whenever Mendelssohn decided he was going to become a bloody superstar, that's when things changed. Choirs and vocal music and singing, and the concept of people singing together in a community should be at the core of classical music. And we are the ones that the chorus master, that's after everyone else has been brought forward. Oh, well done, aren't they great? Look at them. Oh, look at all those amateur people there who are really only here for fun, but they're not really serious artists, like all these people who are professionals. I don't have a lot of time for that. And that gives you a terrible sense of lack of self-confidence. And that bleeds into the school system, where it's all about getting bums on seats as far as the schools are involved. And if you win a big prize and it gets in the local newspaper, it's free advertising for the school. We have a great music program. And look how inspiring that music teacher is. But you know what? The maths teacher is way more important, because that's the one that's going to get you a job. Whereas this is really kind of frivolous. And that's because if we allow a society where music is of such low priority, that in the actual society that it exists in classical music, it's the lowest part of the equation, then you have a problem with that society. It is not, some societies, it is not that way. Estonian society is not that way. Choral music is at the core of their society. I have a Georgian friend, and her society is based around people singing, and people singing in communities and passing on their extraordinary language. My own society, singing is at the core of what we do. And yet in our schools, because we adopted so much of what the British left us, we adopted a lot of their infrastructure, but we also adopted their rubbish school system. Their music is way better than ours. In Ireland, I am ashamed at the way music is taught and the way it is prioritized in schools. I mean, you actually get more points for getting a high mark in mathematics than you do in any other subject. Like music, which is, and I know, and anyone listening here who's a serious musician knows, music changes your life and it alters the lives of young people. It is transformative, and it is what can build their it can be the one thing in their lives that they can grab onto. And it is at the bottom end of the scale of the food chain. And bear in mind, you facilitate that.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. We get choral musicians definitely, and in the U.S. for sure, and that's really all I can speak to. But we do have an inferiority complex in
Yeah.
terms of the overall hierarchy, and part of it is because the choirs oftentimes are so large. Which, by the way, I don't. There are some benefits to having large community groups, but it does create a sense of. Are you familiar with the Pareto principle?
Sorry, say it once again.
Are you familiar with the Pareto principle?
No.
Okay, so it's this concept that anytime you gather a group together, it tends to sift out. It's a psychological principle that tends to sift out that a very small percentage of that group will kind of take leadership really quickly, and then everyone
Mm.
else will kind of achieve a little bit less. Like you'll
So
get.
is that based on gender, just out of interest? Because women don't work the same way as men at all in that way.
No, so it's not really. It's so think about it this way: like if you've got a choir of say 80, and I do
Mm.
find this to be true. Is you've got a choir of about 80, you will get a very small percentage of them that are making almost all of the sound,
Mm.
especially with young untrained singers, because they tend to let the person who is the loudest do the leading.
Yeah. Oh no, I understand that. Yes. Sorry. In that context, yes, I would agree with
Yes.
you. Definitely, that's not
Yeah.
gender based.
Yeah, right. Not gender based at all. It's just a probably has to
A
do with
principle.
personality. Has to probably do with personality. Probably has to do with just the confidence level of each singer and their training.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's a benefit of being together, but at the same time, I find that those students that aren't contributing as much as the other students that are, they
Mm-hmm.
deep down they know they're not contributing as much, and over the
Mm.
course of time when the concert happens and everyone's applauding how great we were, I think at some core part of them, they know that it wasn't really them making all the noise. And even though they smile and their mom takes pictures, I think it eats at some kids that they're not the one really making the noise. And so I think really for me, that's if I can look at a silver lining in the possibility of all, like you described, all these small possibilities of small groups of people getting together to sing, is that maybe we can figure out some way to educate each of these young singers that they are critically important. Um,
Mm. I
and
think the leadership has to come from the top, though.
mhm.
It really does. I mean, this concept of handing proactivity back to people is a very important thing. It really, really is. I mean, how many adults have you worked with who have said, when I was, and sometimes you'll find somebody when you're dealing with an adult group and very, they're, I don't know, there's something really wrong about the way they're singing and their attitude. And if you delve in any way deeply, they say, well, when I was in school, I was told my voice was too loud.
Oh, I've heard stuff like
Um,
that all
mm.
so many times.
Well, every time you hear a director ever say that, they don't know what they're talking about. I hear it in professional choirs. I hear it in, well, no, that's not true, because professional choirs, professional is the state of mind, and it means something different here. If you look at a professional choir performing, each one of the singers is making the same effort to sing. They're making the same effort to combine. When you're looking at amateur choirs, very often you will see individuals taking that lead role that
Yeah,
you're talking about.
right.
Well, that's not the fault of the singers, that's the fault of the director. And that is a person skill. It's not actually one which is related to singing at all. And it's not really a solution to subdivide people out into smaller groups and get them to sing alone and get them to gain confidence. That's not really what it's about. It's about facilitating everyone to do the same thing. So it doesn't matter whether the voice is big or small, or you perceive that your voice is big or small. As long as you are all trying to do the same thing, then it doesn't matter that one voice is louder than another, because everybody then is contributing at the maximum that they are capable of within the
Yes.
context of those rules. And the
Yes.
problem is, Chris, defining those rules. We've had to define them with Anuna, and as a result, when we do workshops with choral ensembles, our aim is to try and neutralize that effect, where the first time I see a singer singing louder than everybody else, I never say sing quietly. I ask the singers around them to explain what's going on. And if I have a very simple theory about that, is that sound produced correctly by the human voice for singing and for our art form goes that way. All right. And in fact, if you've, particularly when you're dealing with trained singers, you're dealing about the stream of air, and then you're talking about the sound appearing somewhere near my lampshade over there. It's almost like it's a spinning orb of light is how I would visualize it. And then you're singing to that. And the voice is not occurring here, the voice is occurring over there. So that concept's a really simple one. So if you've a loud singer standing in a children's choir, and then you have two singers on either side, if the singer is loud to you, but not to them, then the singer is doing the correct job. If the singer is loud to the extent that the other two singers are being occluded by what they're doing, then the sound is traveling that way. And we know that when the sound travels that way, it's not being produced correctly. It's that wonderful thing of watching small children producing sound, and it's all that sound out there. But when the sound is it's being held back here, and what you're hearing is their signing heads, and you're hearing their mouth and the tension in their jaw, and that is what you're hearing. So in Anuna, there's once you cannot hear the person beside you, that means then that they're doing the same thing you are. It's not that they're doing something different. It's that you are no longer aware of what the person is doing beside you, other than that you're both doing the same thing, because the sound is not occurring in this place. And when I deal with youth choirs, that's actually the entire idea behind what I teach them, that if you have a loud voice, it's splattering. It's going that way, and sound goes that way. So visualization exercises can really help with that, and very simple ones which relate to the way you breathe and the relaxation. And of course, meditation is such a major role for young voices, as we know, in this world, and for ourselves, let's be honest.
That explanation, though, that you just gave is blowing my mind, just because it's so simple. But
I know.
But and I love it in the sense that when I sing, so when I put on my performance hat, some of my, because I think you earlier mentioned that you kind of visualize the sound and shapes and all of that, and I feel like I kind of do too. And I find that if I'm singing next to some of my favorite people that I've ever sang next to in all the variety of different groups that I've sung in, then I feel like my sound can cut straight into the room, and their sound is cutting straight into the room, and it mixes like way out there.
But you've now described opera. That's opera. That's the whole point of opera.
Yeah. But when on the flip side of that, when I've stood next to singers that I find hard to sing next to, then I feel myself working really, really hard to cut through their sound.
You're actually working laterally, and you need to be working forward.
Yeah.
I mean, the other problem with these very simple ideas that we use, and I must admit, it is something that does gall me a little bit. I mean, the concept of what we call the Anuna technique is one which is given away. So when people come and they work with us, they work with Lucy Champion and myself, and the singers in the group, we use them as facilitators for workshops. They're actually having this immersive experience where you're addressing all these things. It's like you're stripping away all the outer parts to get to the core of what the meaning of singing is in an ensemble. Very often I do know that when I say things like I just did there, people go, that's it. And it can be dangerous. I mean, there's too many times people have only picked up a small amount of this, and it can be very, very, very detrimental. You don't know what you're doing. And it's something, I mean, it is an ambition of mine that one day the choral fraternity will actually seriously sit down and engage with some of the ideas that we're involved in, and stop coming to us because they're going somewhere else and they want to stop in and say hello, and be in Ireland and go to Christchurch Cathedral and Glendalough and let's have a workshop. And then hang on, they're saying things that are a bit controversial. And then think, this is amazing. So we've actually stopped. It's not something I'm comfortable doing. It's not these ideas are not gratuitous. They are things which are meant to change choral music fundamentally. And even if that's only in a small way, I seriously believe that if enough people knew what we were doing, all the people all over the world doing similar things would be able to link together. I do find that choral music tends to be quite exclusive in that way. I mean, it does amaze me that my colleagues, I have no real contact with my colleagues in the UK, for example, at all, except say hello. They're not looking at what we're doing. I'm watching what they're doing, but they don't really have any idea what we're doing. And in America, they've this idea of us walking over fields, and that's what they think we do. But even there's a couple of live videos of Anuna up, which were not done for PBS, and you'll see them on YouTube. And you can see the singers singing. And I wouldn't mind, but that ensemble that were singing that in 2015, most of the people had only been singing in the group for a month. And at least two of the people had never sung with the group before, and we filmed it. And it's quite extraordinary. You can see people working really hard to do as little as possible. And I've never been asked by anyone about the techniques being used. And we're doing things that a choir of that size really shouldn't be able to do with no conductor. And yet people are looking at it and they're thinking, oh, sure, look at the pretty girls. Oh, look at those handsome young men. Oh, listen to that lovely Irish music. Tall shamrocks. And that's a bit frustrating because, for a start, most of the people on stage aren't actually Irish. And the second thing is that the techniques are so complex to actually enact for people who are so highly trained that what they're doing is as they're singing, they're unlatching 15 years or 10 years of training to go, got to stop doing that with my face. Why am I doing? Oh, okay. So just going to breathe. Hang on, he's breathing. Oh, hang on, I know he's leaning towards me now. I'm intruding on his sound, and I got to. And look, Michael's looking over. How can he hear me over there? Because I can't hear them because I'm actually deaf. I can feel them. I can feel the breath passing down the line, and it's this extraordinary relationship that's gone on. And people look at it and they say, well, you know what? That's lovely. That Irish music. It's lovely. I love that traditional Irish choral singing.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
it's very frustrating. Very frustrating.
Now, first, I would say, but isn't it true though that I appreciate what you're saying about the techniques and people not noticing them, because I could totally see that. But I think you used the term diddly idly earlier, and would you be able to say that it could be some of the diddly idly stereotypes that people have about the group that pay the bills? It's why they.
No.
You don't think?
I think that, see, the association with, no, I don't. I think Riverdance. You're frozen again, Chris. Now you're not. Hello, Chris. You can hear me. I mean, you have to look back at the perception of traditional music. And I mean, as I say, there's nothing wrong with people dyeing their hair green and drinking green beer on St. Patrick's Day. But bear in mind that what a lot of the traditional music that became part of the Irish American tradition was actually not traditional music in the same sense as we have it. There were a lot of people in America who went over and were very serious about their music. Some of the great collectors of Irish traditional tunes and songs were actually Americans. And in fact, you see the influence of the complex forms of music and Appalachian music, and you hear it goes into bluegrass, and I mean that those complex rhythms. You even see it in jazz, and though that's art music. That's, it's music which is a highly sophisticated art form. And the problem is that the stereotype of Maureen O'Hara and the girl at the gate and John Wayne that's unfortunately the one that is perpetrated. So that means we're nice. I'm from Kerry and here I am now to sing an owl song, which isn't really old. It was written in 1932 and I'm singing this song in English which isn't really what we used to do. And that's Ireland. And we'll go, at all, you buy you. And you think, oh my God. I mean, Ireland's a highly sophisticated European country.
Right.
There's an
Now,
extremely high
I'm going to
standard of
stop you. I'm going to
education.
stop you because
And that's the issue we have,
right.
you know?
I think you might have misunderstood my question, because what I didn't mean is that Anuna
No,
is.
I did understand your question. I understood your question fully. You say that a degree of the success was because of that connection to this perception of Ireland.
That when an audience comes, they think they're going to see some kind of traditional Irish.
That's not our intention.
I get it. I just wonder if
see, one of the greatest gifts we were given on the first time we went on a little short hop to America, I think that happened, I can't remember, it's 2002. We did about 5 dates. And I sat in venues, or stood on stage in venues and watched people leave the auditorium, I'd say in every single gig within 20 minutes of the performance starting. And I enjoyed it very much. I do remember somebody, I can't remember where it was, Palm Springs maybe, and we were singing and we started off, and 5 minutes into the piece, a woman in the front row started laughing uncontrollably. And she just didn't know what to do. And because she had come because this was Irish music. And it's not Irish music, it's music written in Ireland by an Irish composer. And most of the singers would probably be Irish, and some would be even Americans. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, it's not our business to adhere to those stereotypes. Like, for example, we only put Danny Boy into our repertoire in, how old were we? We were 25 years old when we put that into our repertoire. And the only reason I put it into the repertoire was because I had to look at the piece and see if I could do something that would change the way the song was actually perceived. And I don't mind saying it's the only version of Danny Boy that I actually, beyond it being a song with a solo singer singing it, it's the only choral version that I like. And that's very rare for me to say that I actually think it's very good, but it's a very good arrangement. And the reason is because it takes the melody and puts a frame around it. It doesn't try and enhance the emotion. It doesn't try and do anything about that. It allows the singers to transmit the words. And I kid you not, I have seen the singers cry on stage, and they're not Irish. And they're not thinking about Ireland. They're thinking about the times that this song is sung in people's lives and what it means. And when we go to Japan, people cry, and they have a version of Danny Boy. It's nothing to do with Ireland at all. The words, it's about a child leaving home and the mother, and they cry when they hear it. So that's almost like a magic in that melody. Mm-hmm. It's not owned by Ireland. And when we're in the Netherlands, I mean, we tour in the Netherlands maybe once or twice a year. And the Dutch are not really like the Irish at all in many ways. But when we're there, I say the same thing when we sing that song. I say, you know, we only appreciate the beauty of our own home when we're away from it. And we only appreciate, for example, a song like Danny Boy. We'd laugh at it and we would never do it. But it's like the Dutch understand Ireland better than we do. Mm-hmm. So that in America, you must never be disrespectful when people have this wonderful visceral response to what they perceive Ireland to be. We love to say we're very sophisticated, and our music is, our culture is very European, and we're very on top of everything and whatever, blah, 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 we're all highly educated. But actually, you know, the country itself doesn't belong to us. The ideas of that country and the ideas of home, as the Germans say, Heimat. I mean, that is the homeland. That's the key to it. And, I was going over one of the songs from Riverdance that Anuna sang the other day for a project, and written by Bill Whelan. The text is, where the river foams and surges to the sea, silver figures rise to find me, wise and as daring, following the heart's cry. And I had to sit down and think that that's been sung, and people think it's new age doggy plop. And it's not, it's poetry. Bill is a composer, and yet he managed to write this exquisite text. And that's why Riverdance is so successful, because the artistry of the people that were involved in it initially it was met by the music and met by the dancing and met by the singing, and the whole thing was like a huge expression of culture. It was nothing to do with Ireland in many ways. It was to do with people who were extremely good at what they were doing, all coming together and having this magical experience. And that's what made that energy work. And we see so many big shows where that the core is at that. The more you try and manufacture something, the more unrealistic and unbelievable it becomes, So
yeah, that's
view on that.
That's a
and the way I evaded your question, I didn't actually answer your question.
It was very artful.
Whatever it was.
It was very artful evasion. And of course, I meant no insult by the question. I just,
no, I know.
Yeah. Now, I do want to touch base on one other thing you were saying before, and of course, we could probably wrap this up pretty soon. And I might have to go to happy hour in my basement bar, but and you have bed like
11 o'clock here,
right? It's bedtime for you. But so just wanted to kind of wrap up the one part of your technique, the conductor, the conductorless or conductor role ideas that you feel like sometimes in the choral profession feel controversial. In other words, you feel like the ideas that you're presenting are controversial. Again, I mentioned earlier, I share a lot of those philosophies. They don't seem controversial to me, but I would say that I understand why they're controversial in that let's say, I'll speak first person, but let's say I just spent $200,000 to get a degree in conducting, an advanced degree or a doctoral degree in conducting. And then someone comes along and tells me the conductor might not be the most important person in the room. And there is a certain amount of...
You're cutting out. You're cutting out. If you just go back to a doctoral degree in conducting, I missed that bit.
Yeah. So if I've just spent $200,000 on a degree in conducting,
indeed,
and then I come across a person who thinks that maybe the conductor isn't as important as maybe I thought I was becoming by getting that advanced degree, I can understand being like, whoa, hold on a second. I got this degree so I could control the aspects of the music making. And so I get that mindset. I imagine that it's a bias that we don't even know that we are getting when we get our conducting degrees. But again, I think I completely agree with it. I trained myself as a conductor so that I could pass my knowledge off to students and to the other singers to try to empower them to make art. And so,
well, hold on a sec. I want to stop you there because I need to be very clear with you about this.
Yeah,
that I have seen the further up you go in conducting, the further up to the top of the conducting ladder in your country and in Europe that you go, the less technique is involved in what you're doing. Technique, the aim of technique, if you're a singer, let's keep it simple. If you're a fencer or you're a basketball player, the aim of technique is to learn it and then conceal it.
Yes.
There's a great sketch in The Simpsons where Homer Simpson is there and he's mayor or president of something or the head of Duff Beer or whatever. And he goes in and he's getting a new suit made and he goes into the tailor and he goes, and his PA says to Homer, he says, let it all hang out. And Homer goes, and then he says to the tailor, conceal it. The point is that that's nothing to do with Homer. That's to do with the tailor. The job of the tailor is to conceal the fact that Homer's a big fat pig. So let's apply that to your conducting degree.
Yeah.
Properly taught and with the same motivation behind it and without the word control involved. Because I think that's got to be so careful about the use of language. And that is the wrong word. Like blend is another wrong word.
I agree.
Blend implies that you have to work with the person beside you. And in fact, the correct way to approach working in a choir is that you are working separately, together, not together, and then trying to get over the fact that in some way you're connecting and it's not connecting there. And then it's about the conductor going, please, this is so unnatural, save me. And they're going, I know how to save you from this unnatural act that the two of you are involved in. And the point we have here is that degrees are sometimes about just the degree. And then you get the degree and then you're a conductor. Let's be honest, that's a problem with every single degree.
Mm-hmm.
I did a degree in English, and I left with a love of English that was so intense and the creative process involved in it. And I know I was in a class where people got the same mark I did or whatever, and they didn't clue what they were doing there for the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, each one of us is individual. The greater your technique, the less you do to show it. I have had master classes, and my colleagues have had with American conductors, where it is all about control. And immediately they do that, we haven't really anything we can do, because that's what they want to do, not what they've learned. And then I've had high school conductors in with me. I mean, I could name about 10 of them. And they start off, and then I just say one thing. I say, right, let's get the choir going. And then we do a couple of warm-ups, and well, we don't do warm-ups, but we get the choir moving and we get the conductor moving with them. And they just stand there and they're going, oh my God, because they're musicians. They're not bus conductors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about them. It's about, and you can see the love that the choirs have for those people. And the fact that any choral director, particularly one that would be dealing with, a group of university students, would take some nobody from Ireland, leprechaun from Ireland, who's coming in and telling you, you know a lot, but you know what? You could know a lot more. And they sit back in front of their choirs and they humble themselves in front of their students. They're big people. And you know what? I would say they're the vast majority of people I work with.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, the more highly trained they are, the more they'll do it. It's really, I was watching Philip Herweger conduct on television recently, and he conducts one of the greatest choirs in the world. And I was watching him. His conducting technique's appalling. That's because he's working with colleagues. He's not working on his own. And they're going, and they love him and they can't take their eyes off him. And I know some of the singers that he works with, and they're geniuses. They're specialists in their own field. They're absolutely like out of this world of the knowledge they have. And they let this guy, who I would, you wouldn't say to him, go and kill that fly in the window, because he wouldn't be able to hit it. But he's a genius, and it pours out of him. I mean, and so many conductors have that. I mean, watching Charles Bruffy with this hand motion, and I'm watching it, and I sometimes, I remember singing when he used to conduct Phoenix Chorale, and trying to work out why people were having difficulty interpreting what he was doing. And then I realized, this is all my music. I know it all off by heart. And I'm glued to what he's doing, because he's forming the sound the way he wants it. And whether I agree with what he does or not is not relevant. I'm having an artistic interaction. And afterwards, I come and say, I don't agree with what you did. And he goes, blah, 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 blah. Now we're having an interaction. And that's awesome. And I love it. And that, for me, is what choral music should be about. We are guides. We're not giving directions. We go with our choir.
Yeah.
And on
absolutely.
that note, I think probably I have spoken enough. I hope somebody talks to me again over in America after this.
Well, I think these are all times for challenge and growth. And I think there's a really important place for these types of discussions where, it's okay to critique a system. And, and we're kind of entrenched over here with a system, like you mentioned before.
No, your system is working in Florida Atlantic University with Patricia Fleitas there, the professor of music there. And I have to say this to you, because, we can't ignore what's going on in the world at the moment, particularly in America. But, I talked to her about her life, and she came over as an immigrant, as a young woman, and she had nothing. And she now directs just a most wonderful faculty of music, with wonderful students. And, and I look at her and she was saying, there should be more opportunities for women conductors and all this. And I would like to feel that I was able to do this and that and the other. And I said to her, this is the only country in the world that you could do this. This is the only place in the world. You've got to realize the value of not the value, but the unique position you are in. You don't have to take what has been done in Europe as dogma. I'm going to say something very controversial and say, a lot of people look to English choral music and say, we all need to be like English choral music. English choral music is ethno music. It's music that belongs to an 800-year-old tradition, in the same way that Georgian choral singing or Albanian isopolyphony exists, or for God's sake, the Pygmies who do that extraordinary singing, and that sounds like birds echoing. They're all parts of the gamelan in Bali. These are traditions that go back. It's ethno music. Your problem in America is that you need to stop looking everywhere else. And you need to take the things that you're doing that are awesome. And I love that word. You're doing so many amazing things, and you need to focus on those things and create a new form of choral music. And you have so many people there innovating. It doesn't have to be shackled to traditions. No one sings English choral music as beautifully as the English do. So it's grand, but why do you want to parrot someone else's tradition and then say that that is the definition of it? Each one of us is an individual. Each part of America should have a different choral voice. Each ethnic group should be allowed to be that voice themselves and feed into the one and feed into the whole. I don't think the value, you see, it's why I had that problem with gospel when I went there first. Gospel makes me cry, whereas an awful lot of choral music I hear when I travel makes me cry, but for completely different reasons. It's when people sing from their souls and their hearts, and it's real. Music should be always real. And of all the bloody countries in the world, the home of so much amazing popular music, why should choral music be so rigid and so intractable? If the people then go out and they walk out the door after you've had that lesson with them, and they're fabulous singers and not actually using, and it's not true. There are loads of people who are using the skills that they have. But look, it's there for the taking. You just use this opportunity to reboot, press the restart button. It's time for new ideas, and it's time for people to come together and talk about things that they don't agree, and say, look, hold on a sec. Why are we doing this? Even what you pointed out about your school system, I sympathize enormously with you on that. How do you produce something of value within that? And it's more of a testament to you and your colleagues who work like you do. I have never met more giving people than I have the teachers that work with junior and middle and high schools. I've never met more altruistic and fine people, and the sacrifices they make in a system that is designed to put them down. Bear in mind something. More people practice choral music in the classical sphere than in any other form of classical music. And you have the smallest voice, you're the least well-funded, and in the education system, you're probably among the least important subjects. Ponder that. Why don't you sort that out now? And come back to me. Now, I won't be able to help you, but come back and I'll give you loads of gratuitous advice.
That's wonderful, Michael. I don't find any of that controversial. I think these are all things that we are at work discussing and dissecting, and I think it's all wonderful, and I think people are going to really be challenged as they listen to this conversation. So I want you to be able to go to sleep soon. So we'll wrap this up.
Oh, it's okay. I'll be grand. Anyway, listen, it's been lovely, Chris. Thank you very, very much. And Um, by the way, just to let you know, you've done a great interview. I can be a big talker, and you listened, which is nice. I appreciate that.
Well, I have the same gift of gab, but I was really challenged by a lot of the things that you said, and like I said, there are a lot of things I agreed with, but I just hadn't ever heard them explained that way. And
well, that's
so,
why it's important to get perspective from
yep,
people with opinions.
yep,
I mean, I do find that is the problem with Irish choral music, that the moment I've never felt any different about having an opinion. My problem has been that very often there's nothing worse. It's great when people disagree. Great.
mm-hmm.
Absolutely brilliant. I gave a lecture over there once some years ago, and I was introduced as, this is Michael McGlynn, and he wants to get rid of conductors. And afterwards, the professor in question came up afterwards, and he said, "I'm so sorry I did that. Now I understand what you're doing." I said, "It's completely believable." But the fact that he'd say it and raise me up, and I went, "God, fair dues to you for saying it," because people don't say that.
Yeah.
Whereas at home, it's much easier to ignore what you don't agree with.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to
That's not a good thing.
I don't want to get rid of conductors either. It's how I pay for my house. But I do want to have to challenge what we think a conductor's role is. Because that doesn't have to stay the same. We can still facilitate community. We can still facilitate education. We can still facilitate art making without having the role of the conductor be the same as it was 200 years ago.
The role of the conductor, we've got to stop looking back 100 years, 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
Bear in mind, choral music has been around as long as people have been able to sing. I don't listen to choral music between 1800 and 1900 at all. I have no interest in that entire form.
Same.
In fact, I don't have very much interest in a lot of it up into the early part of the 20th century. I only kind of start engaging with Hindemith and Poulenc and Debussy, and, well, he only wrote 3 or 4 pieces, or Ravel or whatever. That's when I start getting interested in Stravinsky again, in what's happening. And the problem is that in that bland, I mean, there are wonderful works written there. Not that they're things I'd listen to. I mean, Bruckner's plonked in there as well. Brahms. But that's what defines what you're doing today. And also, you've all these composers writing for these choirs that are conducted. So in other words, you've got composers responding to a form which was only invented 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's other composers. I'm thinking of the Norwegian composer Andrew Smith, or McGlynn, myself, Pareto. And we're composers that actually, and so many other composers, Goretzky, people that respond to the music that was there before. And then choirs come across it and they go, "Oh, this is so strange." I'm sorry, Macho was doing it in the 15th century, or Dufay was doing it, Victoria. And there's not enough known about what went before. And now's the time to go and dig out all that public domain sheet music, and go away and learn how to do it. And with greatest respect, there are too many composers around today. Too many, and not enough of the music is worth performing. So, you've got to, there's a glut of it. Just because someone is a composer doesn't mean that you have to commission them or sing their songs. If somebody's a good composer who knows their skills and is writing music that is there to advance and challenge your ensemble, that's what you need to be. But you need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is a lot of directors don't know that. They don't know enough about the actual world of choral music. And therefore, I wonder, are they choral directors at all? So, there's a lot of knowledge there that people don't have. They don't listen to early music at all. So they don't know how Gesualdo wrote or why he wrote that way, or Monteverdi, how those forms, Gabrieli, or even the English madrigal form. And, I mean, we talk about Byrd. I know an awful lot of American conductors who never performed Byrd, don't know anything about it, don't know anything about Tallis. That's very important. How many people know about all the early music that comes from Central America? I mean, there's a huge amount of it.
Yeah. Oh,
Brazil,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I know Charles Bruffy has been doing stuff on that recently as well. And
Mm-hmm.
it just, oh, sorry, we're going off on another diatribe now, and I don't want to, it's time for bed. But, this is time for change. And sometimes change is not necessarily looking forward. It can sometimes mean looking backwards, looking at what is good. Take that forward and inform yourself. That's really important. And go out
Yes.
and vote. Go out
Yeah.
and vote, by the way.
Absolutely. Do I need to come to Ireland to vote, or does that help?
Well, if you have a postal vote, you'll be doing well.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much. And this was fun. I really enjoyed that. And get some sleep.
Thank you, Chris. And you take care of yourself. And you've frozen again. Good night. Good night.
All right. Bye-bye.
So special thanks to Michael for coming on the show and having such a long and in-depth conversation on so many interesting topics. That second part really got into some very self-questioning types of things for choral directors. So I hope you enjoyed that, found it challenging, and share the conversation with your friends, share the conversation with your colleagues. I think those are ideas that are worth pondering, even if you didn't agree with all of those things. I think they are conversation starters. I especially enjoyed the overall concept of using this time where we aren't singing with each other anymore for a while to have that be an opportunity to reset and pause and think about what we do, why we do it, and then the opportunity when we start again to start again fresh and start again with new ideas. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I love Michael's outlook on that. So just a reminder on the way out, if you enjoy the show, if you support the show, best way for you to do that is to head over to the Patreon. That's patreon.com/choralosophy. For as little as $3 a month, you can become a patron of the show and help in ways that you cannot possibly imagine with keeping the show going and keeping the show paid for, so that I can keep doing it as long as I need to do it and want to do it. I think I'm having fun. This has been a challenging time for sure, but the Patreon members are really keeping me going, so we appreciate that. Then, of course, the sponsors of the show, SightReadingFactory.com, RyanMain.com, GraphitePublishing.com, and VoceVista.com/choralosophy. These are all great products. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today talking about them. Just wanted to remind you that those are out there, and all 4 of those companies have a Choralosophy checkout code that'll get you a 10% discount if you need Sight Reading Factory membership, sheet music, awesome software to analyze the overtone spectrum of your singers' voices. Just really cool stuff there, and awesome people and awesome companies. So check those guys out. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.